Lights, camera, action.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, guys.
This is Married to Movies, episode 1. We are super excited to have you guys here with us as we are covering our first movie. And today, we're going to be talking about Iron Man.
Yes, so I'm going to start us off just with some basic details about the film. So first, it was released May 2nd, 2008. So I would have been 8. John would have been 10. And I can't remember, John, did you see this one in theaters?
Yes,
Okay.
I did. So my dad took my brothers and I have 2 brothers, Josh and Jake. I'm the youngest. So he took us for like a little man trip. My mom and sisters were out of town that weekend, but we all went and saw it in theaters back on opening night. It was great.
I did not see it until 2016 when John and I started dating. All right, so moving on. Director was Jon Favreau, starring Robert Downey Jr., Jeff Bridges, Terrence Howard, and Gwyneth Paltrow. The distributor was Paramount Pictures. Runtime 2 hours 6 minutes. Rating PG-13. The movie's budget was $140 million. And then the box office total that they made was in all $585 million. So breaking that down, it would have been opening weekend they made $98.6 million. Domestically, they made $318.6, and then internationally was $266.7.
Very successful run.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Em, you have some fun facts for us about Iron Man, right?
I do.
Okay. Hit us with them.
All of them right now.
Hey, whatever you want.
Okay. I'll do a couple because I've got a lot.
Okay.
And then maybe after a bit, I can do the rest. So you don't know this, but John is like a huge Marvel nerd. So he
It's true.
knows
I am.
basically everything there is to know. So I'm going to try to stump him. I'm guessing I probably won't be able to, but it's worth a shot. So first, John,
Yes.
do you know who Stan Lee based Tony Stark's character off of?
Yes, I do. It was a real life billionaire. He based it off of Mr. Howard Hughes.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, so kind of going off of that. Yes, he was a billionaire. He was also a producer and philanthropist. And so Stan Lee took a lot of inspiration from Hughes' personality and quirks. Kind of like the fact that he was an adventurer, an inventor, a ladies' man, and in Stan Lee's words, a nutcase. Then, John,
Yes.
do you know what Jarvis stands for?
You know, I don't remember. I used to know. I know it's something like just another really intelligent system or just a rather or something along those lines.
Okay, well, close enough. It is just a rather very intelligent system. So
Okay. Yeah.
you
so
are
I was
basically
close.
correct, yes.
So, fun fact for you, did you know that Jarvis was not originally a computer program?
I did not.
Yeah, so in the comics, originally Jarvis was a butler, very similar to like Alfred and Batman. But that was just another way as kind of time progressed, the comics got more modern as well as the film. They wanted to differentiate him from Batman, but also just it kind of like it plays into Tony Stark's genius a little bit more. So,
All right, let's do one more and then I can come back to the rest later. So, did you know that the action and major plot points of the film were mostly fleshed out before filming began, but the dialogue was not so much? So, a lot of the lines were improvised.
yes.
Okay, darn. Okay,
Yes.
well.
I did know that. I found that out while researching for this movie. So Jeff Bridges, he plays Obadiah Stane in the movie. Also the villain, spoiler alert, but you know, we're over a decade ago. So, Jeff Bridges, who played Obadiah Stane in the movie, commented on this when the movie first came out, saying how it was a really strange experience for him. He basically, Jeff Bridges is like a consummate professional actor. And so when he's doing a movie, he shows up on set with all his lines memorized. And in this movie, a lot of the dialogue wasn't written. So for him, he actually said it felt like a $100 million student film, essentially, just because it allowed him to kind of loosen up and have fun and figure things out as he went, as opposed to, having everything figured out beforehand.
Yes. So clearly I didn't stump you, but hopefully.
Well, you have more, right?
I have more.
Okay.
More.
So yeah, well, you can hit me with some of those later. But okay, cool. Well, we'll jump into some of the production details now. So earlier you said that the movie had a budget of $140 million. Now that was self-financed, which is super significant. So as we all know, Iron Man is the movie that kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, there were movies like Marvel superhero movies that came out before Iron Man. Why weren't those a part of the MCU? Well, it's simple. Back in the 90s, Marvel, as well as the entire comic book industry, was in decline, and they were actually, Marvel and other companies were going bankrupt. So in an effort to try and save their company, executives turned to the silver screen. So about 92, 93, Marvel started making licensing deals with film companies to basically say, okay, we'll license you the film rights to our characters. You have to make a movie within 5 years and you pay us X amount of dollars. So this led to movies like Blade, X-Men, Spider-Man, and a bunch of others. So the structure of these deals were essentially that companies like New Line Cinema, 20th Century Fox, Sony Entertainment, whoever purchased the film rights for a character, they got the majority of the profits from the film. But Marvel got all the profits from the merchandise. So your t-shirts, your toys, video games, whatever was directly related to that film, they got the merchandise profits. So you had all these films that Marvel licensed out the character rights to, like Blade, X-Men. Then in 2002, you had Blade 2 and then Spider-Man in the same year. And all 4 of those movies were mega hits. So much so that Marvel said, we need to rethink our film deal structure. So in 2003, a man by the name of David Maisel came into Marvel, pitched the idea that, hey, you guys have these characters, you should finance the films yourself. So he came in, pitched that idea to the Marvel Studios CEO, at the time, Marvel Studios CEO, Avi Arad, and the then Marvel Entertainment CEO, Ike Perlmutter. Both of those men are no longer associated with the company, but Perlmutter loved the idea, so much so that he promoted Maisel to president of Marvel Studios and said, here are the keys, make it happen. So Maisel and company started planning out how they were going to go about starting the MCU. One major problem. If you're going to start a film and, with hopes of an entire universe, what's an important thing to have figured out?
Probably characters.
Exactly. And that was their major problem. Nobody in the company could decide on who should start the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So characters like Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Black Panther, Hawkeye, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, Nick Fury, and Cloak and Dagger were all considered to get things started. And eventually, after a lot of, presentations and arguments and whatever, a lot of Marvel was decided that they wanted to start the MCU with Captain America. So much so that director Jon Favreau, who directed Iron Man, was actually brought in to direct a Captain America movie, not an Iron Man movie. But it was still not a unanimous decision. It was largely undecided, so Marvel decided that they needed to hold a focus group. So Marvel brought a bunch of kids in, knowing that there is a major market for merchandising. That's where a lot of money is made with all the toy sales, t-shirts, and everything. So they said, we're going to get a bunch of kids in here and see who they like. So they presented all these superheroes to the kids, and at the end of the focus group, they just asked the kids, who would you buy an action figure of? And the overwhelming winner was Iron Man. So production on Iron Man officially started in 2005. However, they still had a major problem. Iron Man was who the kids chose, and they decided that we're going to start the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Iron Man, but he's not a well-known character. So it's kind of hard to believe that now in today's world after, the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But back in 2005, Marvel self-admittedly defined Iron Man as a B-tier superhero. He just wasn't that popular. He was popular enough because he had his own comics as well as being included in Avengers comics, but people like Spider-Man, the Hulk, and X-Men were by far their most popular characters. Their comics sold better. They had super popular cartoons. And because of those things, they were some of the first characters that were chosen to have feature film adaptations when Marvel was licensing them out. They were the most profitable. So what did Marvel decide to do? Well, they held another focus group. And after public feedback, they realized that not only was Iron Man not well known, but most people thought he was a robot as opposed to a man in a suit. So in order to combat this issue, Marvel hired Tim Miller and Blur Studios to produce 3 animated short films ahead of the film's release. So these shorts were called Iron Man Advertorials. They featured Tony Stark suiting up and fighting a giant robot alongside Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk. So, fun fact before we continue, Tim Miller and Blur Studios, they probably don't mean anything to a lot of people, but Tim Miller is a now major Hollywood director. He has directed a Terminator movie and actually the first Deadpool movie. But he founded a company called Blur Studios, which is why they hired him to do it. And they primarily do video game cinematics. So if you've ever played like Halo 2 Anniversary Edition, all the cinematics in that movie were done by Blur Studios. So not super relevant to what we're talking about here, but just cool little sidebar.
It's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes. So anyways, back to production on Iron Man. So now that they knew that most of the public didn't know Tony Stark and also thought that Iron Man was a robot rather than a superhero, they started these animated features. They did have mandates in these advertorials. Like one of the major ones in them was that they had to have, at the beginning, they had to show Tony Stark suiting up. This was to mitigate the assumption that it was a robot. You know, if you see a man getting into a suit, you clearly understand that it's a man and not a robot. So that was one thing that was mandated by Marvel in these advertorials, as well as they had to have Iron Man alongside major Marvel characters. So Spider-Man and the Hulk were ultimately chosen because at the time, those two were the most popular characters in Marvel. And that was to basically put Iron Man on their level. So anyways, Marvel did that. And the next thing on their checklist before they could start shooting was they needed to cast. So Marvel put out casting calls. Lots of actors came in and auditioned. I'm sure, some of you famously know about Tom Cruise and whatnot. And he was actually not even in the running for this movie. Tom Cruise was a favorite to play Iron Man when New Line Cinema had the rights to Iron Man. So originally there were going to be movies about Iron Man made by a different studio. That was all prior to the thinking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So casting process began, and there was one clear standout actor who was the absolute favorite of everybody, and that was Sam Rockwell. So, do you know who Sam Rockwell is?
I do, only because of Iron Man 2, though.
Right. So, Sam Rockwell was actually in Iron Man 2, and he played Justin Hammer. So it kind of, when I first learned that, made my skin crawl thinking about Justin Hammer was originally supposed to play Iron Man, because he's a creep in Iron Man 2. Do you like him?
No, but I think that just gives credit to how great of an actor he is.
Exactly. And that's the point. Sam Rockwell's a phenomenal actor. He has a lot of great movies. But if you only know him from Iron Man 2 and you're disgusted as I was, then he did his job as an actor. So anyways, Sam was the clear favorite by the studio, and Jon Favreau, the director, agreed 100%. Everybody was decided that Sam was going to play Iron Man in the MCU. They just hadn't made it official yet because they had a few more casting auditions. And then one largely forgotten about actor came in and auditioned, Robert Downey Jr. It's hard to imagine a time where RDJ wasn't really a household name, but before 2008, RDJ's time in the spotlight had pretty much passed. So I don't know if you know this, Em, but back in the 90s, Robert Downey Jr. was super prominent, very successful actor. Him and Johnny Depp actually kind of they got their careers started at the same time. They're actually really good friends.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Johnny Depp talks about, this is recently, in recent years, one time he had Robert Downey, well, he calls him Bob Downey. That's how good of friends they are. I've never heard anyone call Robert Downey Jr. Bob except Johnny Depp. So he said, I had Bob Downey over for dinner one night, him and his wife, they came over, and it was Johnny Depp and his son were having dinner with them. And he said that he could see his son, just Captain Jack was fading out of the mind of his son, and he was completely enamored with the thought of Iron Man. I'm having dinner with Iron Man. So anyways, little sidebar there. But yeah, Robert Downey Jr. and Johnny Depp got their start in the industry at about the same time. Super good friends. They were super popular actors back in the 90s. But Robert Downey Jr. had a severe drug addiction. And by 1999, Robert Downey Jr. was sentenced to 3 years in prison. So due to his reputation and his stint in prison, Marvel Studios was extremely opposed to hiring RDJ. Director Jon Favreau actually had to step in and fight the studio. Jon would not take no for an answer. He made the argument, stating, quote, "The best and worst moments of Robert's life have been in the public eye. He had to find an inner balance to overcome obstacles that went far beyond his career. That's Tony Stark." End quote. And Jon convinced him. He won out the studio, and Robert Downey Jr. was cast.
Yeah, so this is a perfect segue into one of my other fun facts. A couple of them, actually. Because
awesome.
You stole a little bit of my thunder because I do have some of the same things that you had. But
okay,
I'll still go through it. So one of the things, like you said, the studio was very hesitant about Robert Downey Jr. being in the movie because of his struggles with substance abuse. But like you said, Favreau argued that his struggles and flaws made him perfect for the part. And he also just really liked how he looked in the suit. And then also, Favreau loved RDJ's performance in the 2005 film Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. So, also, another thing that you stole from me was that Tom Cruise was considered back before this.
Yes.
Yes. But I also found it interesting because I didn't know that some other actors were considered as well. Do you happen to know who they are? Besides the two we talked about, Sam Rockwell and Tom Cruise.
I think Jake Gyllenhaal was one of them, wasn't he?
Oh, maybe I didn't have that one written down.
Okay, I don't know. I know Jake Gyllenhaal was originally, this is completely off topic, but originally in Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock, Tobey Maguire had hurt his back so bad that he wasn't going to be able to film, and Jake Gyllenhaal was going to replace him. But I was thinking that he was originally going to potentially play Iron Man 2. But okay, so who do you have?
Do you have any other guesses?
No.
Okay, I'll give you a hint. National Treasure.
Oh, Nicolas Cage?
Nicolas Cage.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that. So did you know that Nicolas Cage was originally going to play Superman back in the 90s?
Tim Burton. Yes, yeah. I did have that written down too.
Yes, yep.
And then also, another hint, Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, was it Dempsey, Patrick Dempsey.
Yes.
Really?
Patrick Dempsey.
Okay, so I'm sure most of you people know who Patrick Dempsey is, but he was McDreamy on
Yes.
Grey's Anatomy.
Yes.
I hate the fact that I know that.
Derek. Yep.
Yeah. Derek Shepherd, McDreamy.
He only knows because I forced him to watch Grey's Anatomy with me.
I only got through 2 seasons.
Okay. So, do you want me to give you my fun facts? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's hear him.
Okay. So this one you already knew, but
Okay.
for our listeners, one thing that's cool is that Elon Musk brought Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. to SpaceX to give Robert kind of a feel for what it's like to be a billionaire. And then a second one is that the Mandarin was actually supposed to be the villain in this movie, the first one.
So that's not entirely true.
Really? Darn, my sources are wrong.
Okay. So it is true. It is true that the Mandarin was considered. But did you know that he wasn't the only villain that was considered?
No.
Okay. So the Mandarin was originally considered.
Mm-hmm.
He was the first one that they picked.
Mm-hmm.
He was also the first one they decided to pass on. Then they thought that Crimson Dynamo, which you probably don't even know who he is.
No, I don't.
So he's essentially in the comics, he's like a Russian version of Iron Man.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he was going to be he was going to be the villain. Titanium Man, he is also another villain from the comics who was originally going to be the villain. So they kind of went through a slew of villains. Did you also know that Jeff Bridges, who plays Obadiah Stane, was originally he was planned to be in the movie, but he was originally planned to not be a villain until Iron Man 2.
No, I didn't.
Yes.
See, John is so knowledgeable. He's just rattling these off. I have all my facts written down. Okay. So, anyways, kind of still continuing off of that, though. What I had found online was that the Mandarin was supposed to be or considered to be the villain in this movie. And it seemed so certain that Jon Favreau actually announced it at a San Diego Comic-Con in 2006.
Yes, I did know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they obviously ended up switching gears to Obadiah Stane and revisiting the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, which John does not care for that movie as much.
Well, there's just a lot of problems in it, but we're not here to talk about Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3. Okay. And then my last fun fact / facts would just be like some different Easter eggs in the movie. So I know that you probably know about some of them.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, before we jump into story beats, let's hit Easter egg.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you have some that you want to say, or you want me to say mine?
I've
got
I mean, I
three.
can think of some off the top of my head. So
Let's alternate. You go first. One.
okay, so the terrorist or like the terrorists that captured Tony Stark in the movie, like held him captive in the cave. They are actually, if you pay attention, when they have Tony at gunpoint and like they're recording the video of him, behind them is a big red drape or blanket, flag, whatever. And it actually has the logo for the 10 rings. So that's basically like what the terrorist group is in this movie is the 10 rings. And for those of you who don't know what the 10 rings is, in the comics, the 10 rings are what the Mandarin, he collects those. So the 10 rings are very similar to Infinity Stones, at least in their original inception. The Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of changed them in Shang-Chi to differentiate them from Infinity Stones. But in the comics, they were somewhat similar in that they all had a different color and power associated with them. And that's what the Mandarin collected to get his superpowers in order to fight Iron Man.
Yes, that is one that I found too.
Okay.
So my first one is that the Iron Man theme from 1996 Marvel Superheroes animated TV series
Yes.
is Rhodey's phone ringtone,
Yes.
which I thought was pretty cool.
Yes, I did know that too.
Okay. Do you have another one that you want to do?
I do. So this is actually at the end of the movie. So at the very end of the movie, the third act, when Iron Man and Ironmonger are fighting in the streets.
Oh, you're going to say mine, I think.
Ironmonger like basically throws Iron Man into a bus and then turns around and shoots a missile into a bus. And if you look behind him, there's a building that says Roxxon on it. And that probably doesn't mean anything to anybody. I think it might even say Roxxon Corporation.
I believe it is, yeah.
But from the comics, Roxxon Corporation is like a big corporation in the comics that like it affects Spider-Man and Iron, like a bunch of different people it plays into. So you can kind of see that. And interestingly enough, Roxxon had, even though there was an Easter egg in it, or in Iron Man, has never played a role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes. Okay. So my next one is that you can also see in the background. Now I don't remember what scene it's in, but there's a movie billboard in the background of another shot, and it shows the villain. And I don't know this villain, so I apologize if I say the name wrong. But it's Fin Fang Foom.
Yes, that you said it correctly.
Okay. Yeah.
So Fin Fang Foom in the comics is like a giant dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a billboard that has him on it?
Yes, there is.
It just says his name?
No, it's a picture of him.
Ah.
Which
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I was trying to recall the clip that it was in, and I couldn't, so.
There's also another Easter egg. It's hidden pretty well. I don't remember exactly where it's at, but there's a prototype of Captain America's shield in Tony's workshop. It's hidden. It's not really supposed to be seen, and they actually play that up in Iron Man 2. They full on take it out, but you can see it in the first Iron Man.
Yes, and then my last one is just, one that probably everybody knows about is just that Stan Lee makes his cameo, his usual cameo, like in every movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's all I got for Easter eggs.
Stan Lee shows up at the award ceremony. Well, not award ceremony. It was the like star dinner thing that Tony didn't get an invitation to.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. But he showed up anyways.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, those were great fun facts. And now let's jump into some story beats.
Okay. So Iron Man opens up with basically you find that there's, is it 2 Humvees that are driving through?
Yes.
Okay, 2 Humvees, and Tony Stark is in one of them with 3 other soldiers. And
yes,
when I still recall my first time seeing it, I just got into Marvel when John and I started dating back in 2016. So I remember when I first saw it, I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, not what I was expecting to see, just a guy in a suit drinking some whiskey in the back of a Humvee with a bunch of soldiers.
Yeah. So, and I think that, well, I know that it was intentional. So within the first 3 minutes of the movie, we learn everything that we need to know about Tony's character. We quickly learn that he is a womanizing playboy. The soldiers start asking him about cover models and blah, blah, blah. And then the driver of the Humvee speaks up, and Tony realizes that it's a woman. And then he's completely enamored with her, even says, like, I'm having a hard time not looking at you now, blah, blah, blah. So, like, we learn that that's within the first minute that Tony is a womanizer. And then you already said this, but like he's sitting in a Humvee with soldiers, but he's in a suit, he's drinking whiskey, he's wearing sunglasses. So he's clearly somebody of importance, and he's probably a high roller. And then it doesn't take long. One of the Humvees, the Humvee that's in front of Tony explodes, and we're in the middle of a war zone immediately. Soldiers hop out of the Humvee to engage and respond to the action, and 2 of them die. So there are three soldiers in Tony's Humvee. 2 jump out, die immediately. The last one gets out, turns to Tony, and he says, wait here. And Tony yells back at him, wait, give me a gun. And so it's subtle. You could kind of debate this if you want, but the intention of the filmmakers was to show that Tony is self-concerned. You can argue that it's a life and death situation, that anybody would say that, but the point was to basically convey that he's only worried about himself. Like, hey, give me a gun so I can protect myself. So that soldier dies, and Tony realizes that things don't look good for him. He jumps out of the Humvee.
Yeah, and then he tries to take cover. He tries to make a call on his phone. Call who?
He just is trying to call. No, it doesn't show. Like he's just calling for help.
Yeah.
And then a bomb lands right next to him, and it says
Stark Industries.
Yep. So his own company that he's the head of, missile lands next to him, and it explodes. We see that Tony opens up his shirt. He was wearing body armor, so again, this reinforces the fact that he is clearly an important person if he's wearing a bulletproof vest, but he's in a suit. But we can see that shrapnel penetrated it because there's blood coming through it. And then we get the title screen, Iron Man. Then we transition to an award ceremony, and it says 36 hours prior to the events of the opening scene. So we're 36 hours prior to everything that we just saw, and we're at an award ceremony, completely different ceremony. And I love this opening for one main reason. But what were your thoughts when it transitioned?
I mean, this is kind of fast forwarding a tiny bit because it's the award ceremony, and then it shows that Tony's not even there to accept his own award. So in my opinion, like it just kind of showed me even more so who Tony Stark really is.
Yeah. And that was the whole point of it. The reason that I love the opening scene is great. It conveys a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, but then I love the transition to this award ceremony because it's extremely creative in how it presents information to the audience. So obviously you guys know that like we love movies. We started a podcast about it, so that goes without saying. But I love movies so much that like in a lot of my free time, I'll watch YouTube videos that are like film critiques. So a common theme in these film critiques of a bad movie would be a reoccurring theme in all these bad movies is exposition. So essentially what exposition is it's like a really concise, coherent information dump. And the problem with exposition is that like as a writer, you're told show, don't tell. If you just tell the audience something, it doesn't mean anything. If you show them something that can convey the same message, it resonates better on a deeper level. So we have this whole award ceremony that feels extremely organic in how it presents the exposition. I don't feel like Rhodey is just talking to the camera telling me that Tony's a jerk. I see that Tony is being given an award and he's not there. So something's up. He probably doesn't care. And it quickly shows, it transitions that he's over at a table gambling. And there's just a lot of other details that are great like that. Like before the award is even presented to him, like there's this whole video montage that plays and it shows like that Tony was a genius. So we learned that he's like this, super smart whiz kid all his life since he was born. He grew up with his dad who was also a genius. And then we learned that his dad died. And then we learned that Obadiah Stane stepped in to run the company. So he's probably an important character. And we learned that Tony came back and took control of the company back away from Obadiah. And then after the video plays, Rhodey comes up to the microphone. He's the one who's going to present Tony with the award. And, Rhodey's talking him up, saying like how he's so great and that they're great friends. And just like that right there, we learn that him and Rhodey are great friends in an organic way that doesn't feel like it's being shoved down my throat. And then, like we already said, Tony's character or his character flaws are reinforced by the fact that he's not there. He's over gambling with a couple of women around his arms. And then, shortly after that, Rhodey finds him. He's upset with him. And again, we see that Tony is kind of a jerk. I mean, he just could not care less. Rhodey gives him this award, and he just hands it to some random bystander. So then after that, fast forwarding a little bit, Tony's at his home. He's working on his hot rod. We get introduced to Pepper Potts because Tony brought a woman home with him. Pepper kicks her out of the house, and we see him working on his hot rod, and Pepper goes to find him. And this is actually where we see Tony's first genuine interaction with somebody.
I think it really kind of humanizes him a little bit.
And that was the point, because we just saw, I don't know exactly what the timeline is. I know the opening sequence is like 3.5 minutes, and then whatever the award ceremony and all that stuff is. So let's call it the first 10 to 15 minutes of the movie. We have constantly reinforced that Tony is just a self-concerned, narcissistic jerk. But then he's working on his hot rod, and Pepper comes down, and this is actually the first time we see Tony ask about somebody other than himself. She makes a comment about her birthday, and he said, "Is it your birthday already?" First time he asked somebody about their life and not his own. But I think you're exactly right. It's 100% to humanize him and show that there maybe are some redeeming qualities about this guy. So then, after Pepper meets up with Tony and they talk in the shop, Tony heads off to the airport to meet Rhodey because he has a weapons demonstration on another side of the world that he has to fly over to. So they hop on the plane. Tony's character flaws are reinforced. He's being mean to Rhodey. He's focused on himself. He's enamored with women. And then they arrive. They are at the weapons presentation, and Tony's given his speech. He does a great job, but it's kind of, again, reinforcing this idea that the guy is just really self-concerned, really arrogant too, kind of in the way he presents it. But it's done kind of through the lens of comedy, so it doesn't feel as coarse to the audience. But then we're pretty much at the point of being full circle. Tony hops in one of the Humvees. Rhodey runs up to him to jump in, and Tony's like, "Nope, we want to have fun and on this ride. This is the fun V. You can hop back there on the humdrum V." And then we've now approached the opening sequence. Bomb goes off. Shrapnel goes into Tony's chest, and now we're all caught up.
Yeah. So then we kind of see that Tony has been captured, like John just said, and he is in this. Well, he wakes up in this dungeon of sorts, cave or something.
Yeah. Well, and we kind of get like this jarring, disoriented, like flash of sequences of like, you can kind of pick through what's going on, but it's basically like just Tony screaming, and you can kind of see it looks like somebody's like maybe operating on him. Kind of hard to make it out, but you get the gist that something crazy happened. Right.
So when I first watched it, and I don't know if this was something they were trying to do or if it was just me not catching on to something I should have, but when after that sequence, they show Jensen, and I was confused, honestly. When I first saw it, I really thought that he might be somebody that we shouldn't like. But I mean, we quickly realized that he's on Tony's side and he's a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of have like some short exchanges. You don't really know how to feel about Jensen at first.
Right.
But you see Tony try to get up from the bed, and he can't because he's got these wires coming out of his chest and he's hooked up to a car battery.
Right.
That's when Jensen starts speaking up, and he's like, "I wouldn't do that," blah blah blah. And this is actually when we first start to get some really important information about Tony's future. So Jensen, he says, "I've seen this before. I've seen people in my village that have had this. We call them the Walking Dead. Essentially, there's shrapnel that's in your body. It's making its way to your heart, and you'll be dead in a week." But Jensen performed this surgery to basically make an electromagnet that's sitting inside Tony's chest, which is keeping the shrapnel from going into his heart, but he's limited to the power of the car battery. So we learn here that it's not looking good for Tony. He doesn't have much to live for, and he also doesn't have much time to live. And then they kind of keep talking. And I don't know like what your notes look like, Em, but I kind of have some gaps in the story here because there's a lot that happens, and we're obviously not going to cover everything beat for beat. But what we do see is that some of the people who captured Tony come in, and Jensen tells them like, "Do as I do, follow my lead," and that's kind of where we start to see like, okay, we need to trust Jensen. And then we learn that these guys are Tony's biggest customers. You know, Tony's really upset. He says, "How do you have my weapons?" And you know, well, we're your loyal customers. Blah blah blah, whatever. And so Tony's really upset because he's never sold to these guys, but somehow they have all their weapons, and they're demanding that Tony build a Jericho missile, which is actually the missile that Tony did the presentation of. It's like this really strong weapon. And then, so we'll kind of jump around here. Do you have anything?
I kind of have some holes too, so we can skip to the next important piece.
Okay. So fast forwarding a little bit, after the Ten Rings are talking to Tony about making the Jericho missile, him and Jensen are just sitting in the cave talking, and Jensen's asking him, you know, do you have family? Blah blah blah, and Tony's like, no, I don't have anybody. And so Jensen says, a man who has everything and nothing. And so, actually, I wish I would have asked you this sooner, but kind of a recurring theme that was running through my head as I was watching this was like, how would you describe, like if you had to in one word, what would you describe like Tony's character arc or kind of the running theme of the movie? And my answer was legacy. I feel like that's like kind of the running theme throughout the movie is legacy. What do you have to live for? What's going to be here after you're gone? You know, so on and so forth. And that's kind of where we first see this emerging. I mean, we're presented with reasons prior to this why Tony doesn't really have much of anything, at least nothing of substance. He has his company, he has his name, but those things go away. But you know, your legacy, your bloodline, your family, that stays forever. And so you're a man who has everything, one of the richest men in the world, blah, blah, blah. You have nothing. And, you know, we can kind of see Tony like just put his head down. It hits him hard. So, okay. What else did you have?
My next thing is like fast forwarding to when the people come barging in and basically say, because they feel like Tony's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And so.
Okay. Yeah. So Tony's been like, Tony and Jensen, they agree to work on the missile for the Ten Rings. They're going to build this for him, but secretly they have no interest in doing that. We see Tony make a arc reactor for his heart, so he can now walk around
without a battery.
And then, you know, beyond that, he draws out blueprints, shows them to Jensen, and it's a suit. It's not a missile. And he says, "This is our ticket out of here." So we're gonna fast forward through a lot of stuff. We're not gonna cover every single story beat, but those are kind of the big things that have happened. So they're working on this suit, and all right, so go ahead. This is where you're at.
Yeah. So basically, all I had written down about this part is obviously the guys that are holding Tony there figure out that something isn't right because they've got those cameras looking in, and they can see that he's clearly not working on a missile, and so they barge in and basically just adding some extra suspense and keeping the viewers on edge a little bit more. They say that Tony now has 1 day to finish the missile.
Yeah. So now we've got a ticking clock behind them. So we know things are going to ramp up quickly. So they work super hard. You can see that Tony finishes the Mark 1 and it's the next day. So they're more or less finished where we pick up the next day, but not all the way finished. And they send some soldiers to the cave where Tony and Jensen are, and they start yelling at Jensen. Jensen's like, "I don't speak Hungarian." He keeps yelling at Jensen and eventually decides to open the door. Well, they had a bomb wired up, it explodes, and everything just gets turned up to, 100 super fast. Things accelerate, and we're in the middle of the action. So Tony finishes getting the suit going. Jensen's like, "Hey, we don't have enough time." And Tony's like, no, stay here. You know, let's stick to the plan. He's like, I got to buy you more time. So he grabs a gun. He runs into the cave, just firing, you know, to make sure that Tony can get the suit functional so that he can get out. And then it finally happens. Lights go dim. We see just one circular beam of light in the darkness come out, and he starts lighting up the soldiers, punches them. They go flying. A guy runs up to him, shoots him in the helmet, bounces off, and actually it kills him. And then, you know, Tony's kind of flying through well, not literally flying. He's getting through the cave quickly, taking down guys left and right. And then we find Yinsen.
Right, yeah. So Yinsen basically sacrifices himself to save Tony. And earlier on, Yinsen says to Tony that he has a family and he has hope that he'll see them soon. And at this point, we find Yinsen, who has clearly been injured.
Yeah, he's laying on the ground. You can clearly see that like there's blood all over his shirt. He's been shot.
Yes. So clearly he's not going to make it. And we find that his family actually is all dead, and he does have hope to see them because he's going to see them now.
Yeah, so, you know, Tony tries to get him to, no, like, come on, I'm going to get you out of here to go see your family. And Yinsen's like, my family's dead. I'm going to go see him now. And then this is where it really, really hits home. Again, that theme of legacy. He whispers to him, he says, don't waste your life. And then he says it a second time. He says, don't waste your life. And I mean, what a powerful moment to really cement Tony becoming a hero, that his old self is dying, that he is, you know, transcending it, working through his character flaws to become something better. Very much in the same way that Uncle Ben does for Spider-Man. That was intentional to show kind of the hero's moment. But anyways, so yeah, he says, don't waste your life. And Tony goes out and they light him up with a bunch of gunfire. He's finally outside the cave. They're lighting him up and
he lights them up with flamethrowers.
Yeah, he says, my turn. Lights up flamethrowers. Fun fact, did you know that was all 100% real?
I didn't until just yesterday when I was doing some research.
Yeah. So, the Mark I suit was 100% real. It weighed about 90 pounds, the suit by itself. They had a stunt actor in it, and they had fuel and everything. What you see on camera is not CGI with the flames. It is kerosene that they are shooting out. It is 100% captured in camera, which I thought was awesome. I always thought it was just CGI. But another thing I learned on this movie, that Jon Favreau was very adamant that things be done for real. For a couple of reasons. One, it's like, you know, if it's shot in camera, it never goes out of date, versus like CGI is always going to continue looking better and better. So it dates your movie at a certain point. And then also too, as hard as it is to believe, shooting it for real is actually a lot cheaper than CGI. But anyways, so Tony does that and he gets out of there. He's able to escape. We see him fly in the Mark I, but it is short-lived, and he crashes in the desert and is basically, you know, he's by himself, hoping that somebody will find him, and they do.
And a key part of that is he's walking away from his crash site, leaving everything behind from his suit.
True. So after Tony's walking and he gets found, we see Rhodey finds him, and they take him back to the States. Once he gets back to stateside, Pepper's there waiting for him. They hop in a car with Happy, his driver, who's also played by Jon Favreau, the director of the movie. And Happy says to Tony, where to? And Tony says, well, there are two things that I want to do. He says, I want an American cheeseburger. And before he can say the second, Pepper says, you know, that's enough, stop. Because she's assuming, based on his past character traits and whatnot, that what he's about to say is probably inappropriate. And he does the unexpected. He asks for a press conference and completely takes Pepper off guard. She's actually shocked because this is completely out of character. And so he goes and gets his cheeseburger, gets back to Stark Industries, and has a press conference. And one thing that, again, this is subtle. It was also improvised on set. It was subtle and improvised by Robert Downey Jr. But press conference gets started, and he says, "Hey, can we all just take a seat? Like, let's sit down." And RDJ's thought in doing that was to kind of symbolically show that Tony's a different person now. He's a little bit more down to earth, and this is just a real easy way to physically show that. So he has the press conference, and again does the unexpected. He says, "Effective immediately, we're going to stop making weapons." So then everybody goes nuts. They cancel the close the press conference, and from there, Tony and Obadiah go elsewhere. Obviously, this is a shock, but not for the audience, because Tony's, in the first half of the movie, very upset that his weapons are in the hands of terrorists, and so he's beside himself about it. He wants to actually do something, and he does it. Obadiah later finds him and kind of lectures him about it, and that's that. So we're going to skip forward a little bit, unless you have something. Do you have anything?
I don't know if you were going to mention this, but we also find that the board wants to shut Tony completely out of Stark Industries due to PTSD.
Yeah. So I think that's a little bit after my next point.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But yes, so after Tony cancels the weapons division, it has major ramifications, and Obadiah and Tony are talking about it, and Obadiah tells Tony like that the board wants to lock him out because he has PTSD. He's not operating in the company's best interest, essentially. And actually, I want to circle back to that in a minute.
Yeah, great.
So before that scene, Tony's down in the shop and he calls Pepper down. Again, we see another humanizing moment of Tony, but Pepper comes down, says, "Hey, what do you need?" And we see that Tony has a new arc reactor that he needs Pepper to put in his chest. He says, "This one's way more powerful. It's going to be a lot better. I need you to take the old one out." And there's a comedic bit in there where she does exactly the opposite of what he says and whatnot. But then it gets kind of serious. She says, "Don't ever make me do that again." And Tony looks at her and says, "I don't have anybody but you." And again, reinforcing kind of this idea of legacy. Tony's starting to think about his life a little bit more. And again, he's having a sincere, genuine interaction with somebody where he's not focused on himself. So then, circling back to what we were talking about just a minute ago, Obadiah and Tony are talking about, the board wanting to lock Tony out, blah, blah, blah. And then I wrote this down on my notes. Tony says, "I'm being responsible. That's a new direction for me," or it's a new direction for the company, this, that, whatever. But he kind of puts his foot in his mouth. Obadiah kind of smiles because Tony admits that he's been irresponsible most of his life. But it kind of shows where Tony's heart is at, that he's interested in being responsible, and he recognizes that he's never been that way for most of his life. So what do you have after that?
My next thing is just that, like, when Tony, makes his new suit, and just like those first shots of him testing it out and things like that. But that's kind of a little bit ahead.
That's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's basically it. I just literally wrote, the first shots of Tony flying around in the suit are cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we see that Tony's going to start on a new suit, way sleeker, way better, way more streamlined than the Mark I suit. And then we get an awesome montage of him testing it out. There are some really funny comedic bits in there with him and the dummy, with him and Jarvis, with him smashing into a wall. But by the end of it, we finally see Tony taking flight through the city. And basically he's full-blown Iron Man. So then he gets back to the house, and Pepper gives him a gift. He opens it up, and it's the old arc reactor. Which I guess we forgot to mention this, but when Tony takes out his old arc reactor, he tells Pepper to throw it away. And, he says it's a relic, I'm not somebody who holds on to these things, whatever, tells her to throw it away. Well, she kept it and then got it engraved and it says on there, proof that Tony Stark has a heart. So again, ingraining this idea that Tony is a self-concerned, arrogant, narcissistic jerk. But, this is a way to kind of make light of it and show that,
his shell is slowly being chipped away.
Exactly. This is a tangible way to reinforce that to the audience. So then Tony has the flight scene. He's back at the house and he turns on the TV. He sees that there's a party going on. That's the Stark annual something or other that, it's being hosted by Stark Industries, and Tony didn't get an invite. So he decides, well, it's my party. I'm going to show up anyways. He goes to the party, finds Pepper there, and kind of starts flirting with her a little bit. He starts talking to her, and she's like, no, this is embarrassing. Like, everybody knows exactly how you are with girls, blah, blah, blah. Again, reinforcing this public idea, or the public's kind of idea of who he is, that he's this womanizer and all this stuff, but that's not Tony anymore. And Tony doesn't feel that way. And he continues to tell Pepper, no, it's not weird, whatever. And then lo and behold, the reporter from the beginning of the movie finds Tony there, and she's really angry with him. She says, is this what you call accountability? You said you were done making weapons, but here's photos from a little town called Golmira, which I don't know if you took note of, but Golmira, in the beginning of the movie, Jensen says that's his hometown.
Oh, I did not notice that.
Yes. So she says this is pictures of a town called Golmira. The Ten Rings have taken over it. People are being forced out and men are being murdered, blah, blah, blah. And your weapons are on, or your company's name are on the crates for the weapons. And so basically berating him, saying like, you're a hypocrite, blah, blah, blah. And Tony's telling her like, hey, I'm not my company. I didn't approve any of this. And well, your company did and whatever. And then Obadiah runs into him.
And this is kind of where we find out that Obadiah is the one who locked Tony out of the company due to quote unquote PTSD.
Yep. So he tells him, he's like, who do you think tried to lock you out of the board? I'm just trying to protect you. And this is kind of, we don't outright learn that Obadiah is the villain just yet. But Tony stands there clearly in shock when Obadiah tells him this. And, I think we kind of got a little bit ahead of ourselves. So Tony finds Obadiah and is really upset with him and says like, hey, what is this? Why is this here? And Obadiah just kind of smiles, doesn't really say much, and basically alludes to the fact that, yeah, I approved him. I did it. And then that's when he tells him like, I tried to get you locked out of the board. You're not operating in the company's best interest. I'm trying to protect you, whatever. And then we see that, Tony's just standing there by himself, clearly upset. We get a cut, transitions back to Tony in the shop. He's now got his Mark III suit, which has been painted. It's got the gold alloy with a little bit of hot rod red in there, which was painted that way to prevent the icing problem. So then he's got just a gauntlet on, nothing else, and he's tightening it, testing it out, and this is when he sees footage of a reporter in Golmira, and he sees what's going on there. He sees his weapons, he sees the people in exile, and he's getting more and more visibly upset. Tony gets up and walks over to, he has these glass panels in his shop, and he sees his reflection. And I'll pause right there. When would you say that Tony is cemented, like his hero's journey is complete, essentially, and he's no longer the former Tony Stark? He is now Iron Man. When would you say that happened in the movie?
It's hard to tell. I'd say it's either now because he's seeing himself and he's he's having kind of like that self-realization kind of moment, but also I think honestly, just like when he was back assembling his new suit and, like those cool shots, he's like you can tell how much it means to him as he's flying around and things. So
Yeah.
one of those moments probably.
Yeah, so a lot of people argue this online. They'll say that no, when Tony takes flight is the first time, like when he becomes Iron Man, or when he first comes out of the cave, that's when he's Iron Man. When he is first in the Mark II suit, he's Iron Man. And I will say 100% that I feel like this scene is when he is cemented as Iron Man. He looks in the reflection. There are 3 panels there, and he puts his arm out and blows one up. Then he blows the next one up. Then the next one. So I feel like it cements the idea that he's shattering his former image. You know, the narcissist, gone. The playboy, gone. The jerk, gone. And, you know, you could go on and on and on. But he blows every single one up, suits up, flies out. Fast forward, we see Tony in Gulmera. And he, honestly, in a matter of, it was probably a 1-minute scene, maybe 2-3 minutes, not very long, wipes out all the terrorists there, absolutely wrecks them. He gets shot at by a tank, takes a step back, shoots a missile about the size of a pepper, and blows up the entire tank. And he heads on his way back home. He gets a run-in with the Air Force, accidentally blows a plane up, but does the right thing, saves the pilot, and has a funny interaction with Rhodey along the way. But fast forwarding a little bit, we see Tony back in his shop. He's in the gantry machine, trying to get his armor taken off, but it's not going super well. He's getting annoyed, and Pepper walks in. She sees him and is almost distraught. You can hear the sadness in her voice and the disgust almost, and says, "Are those bullet holes?" And, you know, he basically tries to play it off. He's like, "Let's face it, this isn't the worst thing you've seen me doing, you know, whatever." Like, and then they actually kind of get into an argument. And this is when, again, that total transition into the hero is cemented. Tony says, he gets louder and louder as he's talking, and he finally says, "There is nothing but this. There's the next mission and nothing else." And we see that his character is fully cemented, fully dedicated into this hero, that his only focus is stopping the bad guys. He doesn't care about anything else. He just wants to do what's right. And he then, shortly after that, in a much softer voice, tells Pepper, "I shouldn't be alive unless it was for a reason." And that's kind of the end of the scene there. But what do you have next, Em?
My next thing is when we find Obadiah back with the man who was with Tony back in Afghanistan, I believe.
Yeah.
And we find that he's the one who wanted them. Obadiah is the one who wanted them to kill Tony originally.
Yep. So we learned that Obadiah is originally the one who ordered the hit on Tony. And see that Obadiah has been the big bad the whole time, that he's the man behind the curtain, essentially. Then he kills all those terrorists that have been kind of intertwined with Tony's journey up to this point. And then we transition back to Tony's at his mansion and is just kind of hanging out. Obadiah shows up. He uses the same paralysis device that he uses against the terrorist. And this is when he basically starts divulging all the information to Tony. He tells him that he's the one who ordered the hit on him. He tells him all this stuff that the audience already knows, but Tony didn't know. And the only note I had from this scene was that, so Obadiah starts taking the arc reactor out of Tony's chest. And as he's doing it, he says, "You tried to rid the world of weapons and you ended up giving it its best one." Or no. Sorry. That's at the end of the movie. Sorry. I got ahead of myself. Forget that I said that, guys. What Obadiah says to him before that, as he's taking out the arc reactor, he says, "This is your legacy." So we now, I mean, you could honestly say that at this point I'm Jon Favreau, because I knew before this even happened in the movie that the theme was legacy. And Obadiah actually says it. He says, "This is your legacy," which we know that it's not. His legacy is Iron Man, and, you know, his hero's journey, so to speak, at this point. But then he leaves Tony for dead on the couch. He doesn't have a heart. Tony's going to be dead in a matter of minutes, and Obadiah leaves. We see Tony struggling down to the shop. Eventually, he's able to get arc reactor that Pepper had kept for him, the one that she had engraved. And with the help of the dummy, the robot dummy, he's able to get the arc reactor and put it back in his chest.
Yeah. So what I have is kind of skipping forward quite a bit. So do you have anything up until when Pepper's in Obadiah's office?
No, I do not.
Okay. Well, Pepper finds out from Tony that Obadiah is behind all of this. And so Pepper goes into Obadiah's office, hacks onto his computer and starts and sees that he was behind Tony's capture. And so she's trying to, download all of this onto a flash drive so she can, get this to who she needs to get it to and get him behind bars, basically. So then, of course, Obadiah walks in and we can't really tell for sure if he knows what she's up to. It was kind of like hard to gauge. But as they're talking, like she secretly downloads everything and then they're just kind of, making their chit chat back and forth. And she sneakily hides the flash drive.
Mm-hmm.
And then she leaves and he realizes right after he goes to the computer and sees that she has downloaded something.
Yes.
So.
And actually during that scene too, which again, this is like the third time they've covered it in the movie, but we already knew that Obadiah ordered the hit on Tony, but this is when Pepper learns about it. She finds a file of the terrorists basically sending a video to Obadiah saying, "You did not tell us that the man you hired us to kill was Tony Stark. The price is now tripled, blah, 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 whatever." So I pretty much didn't have anything as far as notes go for the rest of the movie. I had one thing. What did you have?
My next thing is that we see Obadiah has recreated the Iron Man suit and
except it's much bigger.
Way bigger.
Yeah. And fun fact, that suit is real too.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's so big that obviously they couldn't make legs for it. So the top half of the suit is real and it's on a gantry essentially. So it like or not a gantry, like a stabilizer, like like they use for cameras.
Mm-hmm.
It's like on one of those so that they can but it's like modified so that they can make it look like it's walking in camera. But yeah, that was another real suit.
Yeah, so basically there's this big, scene between Obadiah like chasing down Pepper and then Tony comes in and they have their big, fight scene and then, up on the roof and all of that stuff. But that's basically all I have written down. And just that, Pepper ends up hesitantly pushing that button to.
Yeah. So right before that, so yeah, I really don't have any other notes. I think at this point we were pretty invested in just enjoying the movie as opposed to taking notes. But Tony and Obadiah have the final big fight. They go all over the city. They end up on the top of Stark Industries. And this is when I said this line earlier, but this is when the legacy theme finally comes full circle. Obadiah is yelling at Tony as he's about to kill him. He says, trying to rid the world of weapons, you gave it its best one." And that's when, it's cemented that Tony's legacy has been fully defined, and it's the complete opposite and misunderstanding of Obadiah because he's the villain and he can't see it. But, in his mind, well, you gave the world its best weapon, the Iron Man suit, and that's the reality that Iron Man's not just a suit, it's the man, it's Tony. Tony went on the hero's journey. He went through that life-changing event where he realized that life is short, that living for all this material stuff is garbage, that it has no benefit, that it has no lasting effect. But what does have a lasting impact is helping people, helping others, valuing other people higher than yourself, as well as understanding that it's all finite. Money is finite. It doesn't get you anywhere. So as Tony said before, there is nothing else. I'm not interested in anything. It's only the next mission. And that's his legacy. His legacy is Iron Man, who is himself. And that's essentially the movie. We have a scene after everything's said and done. Tony beat Ironmonger. They have a press conference, and the famous line where Tony stands up and he says, "I am Iron Man," happens, which, by the way, was also improvised. That was not at all in the script, and Tony was not supposed to reveal his secret identity. It was supposed to be kept a secret. Iron Man was going to be a bodyguard for Tony Stark. They were going to keep his identity hidden, at least in the meantime. But Robert Downey Jr. said the line. It worked perfectly, and they really felt like it made sense thematically for their universe to not focus on secret identities as much as they did in the comics. And so then we go into the credits roll, and then fast forward through the credits, we have a after credits scene, which after credits scenes were not made famous by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They happened in Marvel movies even before the MCU. They happened in movies before Marvel was doing them. But we have an after credits scene, and it's basically that Tony walks into his mansion, and it's at night, it's dark, he flips the lights on, and there's a man standing there. Turns around, it's Samuel L. Jackson, who's playing Nick Fury. Nobody knows this in the movie yet, but he's the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he basically tells Tony, he's like, "You think you're the only superpowered person out there?" And originally, fun fact, in the script, Nick Fury was supposed to say there that he said, "I've got enough problems dealing with radioactive spiders and mutants," referring to Spider-Man and the X-Men. But because of the film rights being at different studios, they weren't able to use that line. But they tried. Actually, another fun fact, I just remembered this one. Originally, to legitimize Iron Man, because again, remember, Iron Man was not a well-known character at the time, they were going to have an agreement with Sony that Tony Stark was the one who designed Doc Ock's arms in the Sam Raimi universe. But again, that didn't end up happening. So anyways, we have the end credit scene with Nick Fury, and he tells him, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative." And then it's over. And that's Iron Man 2008.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening and for coming along this journey with us. It's been a blast just talking about one movie so far.
Yeah, thank you guys. We're super excited that you listened. If you liked what you heard, let us know and spread the word. Whether it's sharing it to Facebook or something like that, liking it on YouTube. You can find us anywhere. Recommend us to your friends. We're really excited about this. We do have about 20 episodes planned already. You can look forward to our next episode. We're going to cover Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse the Black Pearl. So you can look forward to that episode. But thank you so much for joining us. Can't speak. And we hope that you come back next time.
See you guys later.
Bye.